responsibility the students are involved in. Those who are, they cannot afford themselves to come here and stay in Delhi, but they can get their degree through online process. So this is also a parallel, we can say. The parallel institutions is very very positive. So this is the brief introduction about the institution, and I know about the introduction completed to the last time we visited here. So that's I will not take much more time because we are running late, and you have a very important lecture on global peace index to 2026. So I'll say thank you to all of you, and especially our guest, Mr. Fred Seville. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, yes.
Good afternoon to everyone present here. Our distinguished guest and speaker, Mr. Fred Seville, Professor Aslam Khan Saab, Director, Center for Distance and Online Education, Professor Abuzar Khairi Sahab, Director, Nelson Mandela Center for Peace and Conflict Resolution, Professor Rajiv Nayan Sahab, Nelson Mandela Center for Peace and Conflict Resolution, respected senior professors, faculty members, and colleagues. Very warm welcome to you all. It is a pleasure to have you with us this morning at Center for Distance Online Education, Jamia Millia Islamia. I welcome you all to this special lecture on Global Peace in 2026, Challenges and Prospects, jointly organized by the Center for Distance and Online Education and Nelson Mandela Center for Peace and Conflict Resolution. The theme of today's lecture is both timely and significant. In a world facing conflicts, geopolitical tensions, social inequalities, economic uncertainties, and emerging global challenges, the pursuit for peace has become more important than ever. Today, we have the opportunity to listen to an eminent international expert and reflect upon the challenges as well as the prospects for global peace. Before we begin the academic proceedings, however, let us start in keeping with the cherished tradition of Jamia Millia Islamia with the recitation of verses from the Holy Quran. May I therefore invite Dr. Khalid Hassan to kindly come forward and recite a few verses from the Holy Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله عما يشركون هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم صدق الله العظيم. हाजरीन, जो मैंने ये तिलावत की है चंद आयतों की, वही अल्लाह है जिसके सिवा कोई माबूद नहीं। वो तमाम पोशीदा छुपी हुई चीज़ों को और तमाम ज़ाहिरी चीज़ों का जानने वाला है। बरसिफ़ुल निहायत रहम वाला है। और वही अल्लाह जिसके अलावा कोई भी इबादत के लायक नहीं। हकीकी बादशाह रियली किंग वही है और तमाम ऐबों से पाक है। उसका कोई शरीक नहीं। सलामती यानी पीस, अमन देने वाला निगहबान है, जबरदस्त बड़ाई वाला है। और वही अल्लाह जो तमाम मखलूक का पैदा करने वाला, बेहतरीन तस्वीर बनाने वाला, और उसके अच्छे से अच्छे नाम हैं। तमाम जमीन और आसमान में जितनी चीजें हैं वो तमाम के तमाम उसकी तस्बीह और बड़ाई को बयान करती है। वो गालिब है, जबरदस्त है, हिकमत वाला है। बहुत शुक्रिया।
Thank you, Dr. Khalid Hassan Saab. May these words guide us toward wisdom, understanding, and peace. It is now our privilege to felicitate our respected dignitaries and distinguished guests. May I now request Professor Aslam Khan Sir, Director, Center for Distance and Online Education, to felicitate our chief guest and speaker, Mr. Blake Seville.
There's more.
So may I request Professor Rajiv Nayan sir to kindly felicitate Professor Abuzar Khairi sir. And may I now request Dr. Dinesh to kindly felicitate Professor Aslam Khan sir, Director, Center for Distance and Online Education. Sir, we are deeply honored by your presence at Jamia Millia Islamia and are grateful to you for accepting our invitation to share your valuable insights with us. We shall now move to the welcome address. It is my pleasure to invite Professor Abuzar Khairi to welcome our.
Invite the speaker.
Okay.
Invite the speaker.
Okay, so it is now my privilege to introduce our distinguished speaker, Mr. Blake Seville. Mr. Seville is the Chief Operating Officer of the Institute for Economics and Peace, headquartered in Sydney, Australia, with offices around the world. The Institute for Economics and Peace is a global think tank with a very interesting mission to change the way the world thinks about peace. Its work engages with the United Nations, governments, and development organizations, bringing data, evidence, and research into the way we understand peace and conflict. Mr. Seville himself brings a particularly interesting perspective to this work. His professional background extends beyond peace into strategy, leadership, finance, organizational development. He has served in a number of senior executive, non-executive positions, including roles of CEO, CFO, and corporate development director. He is also a chair of Smart Recovery Australia, a leading organization working in the field of addiction recovery. He holds an MBA and is a fellow of the Australian Institute of Company Directors. With his wide-ranging professional experience and his work with the Institute for Economics and Peace, we have a wonderful opportunity to hear his perspective on the challenges and prospects for global peace. Mr. Sehgal, we are truly delighted to have you here at Cdoe Jamia Millia Islamia. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our distinguished speaker, Mr. Brett Saddle.
It is a great pleasure and an honour to be here. I almost didn't recognise myself when I was introduced. The Institute for Economics and Peace is dedicated to the simple proposition that peace can be understood, measured, and because it can be measured, it can be managed. Our aim is to change the paradigm about the way the world thinks about peace. Sadly, as my business friends never stop to remind me, I'm failing on my KPIs in the world as it is today. The messages that I'm going to give you over the next 20 or so minutes are not going to be particularly hopeful. Nobody here will be particularly surprised about that. But the very fact that so many people are here who are interested in this subject and are studying this subject, that itself is an act of hope. And that's something that we should celebrate. In terms of the Institute, as was said, we've got offices in Brussels, New York, Nairobi, Manila, around the world, but our headquarters is in Sydney. And the background to the Institute is that it was founded by a wealthy entrepreneur. He sold his business, decided to give back, was working in Africa, and somebody said to him, where is the most peaceful place in the world? And he realized that there was no measure of peace. And so he created it. That is the Global Peace Index that I'm going to talk to you about, and that has become the institute that I work for. We are living in a highly polarized society. I don't need to tell anyone in the room that. One thing I would state is that we are a non-political, non-partisan institute, so we do not support one side or another. And other than promoting peace, we do not proselytize, we do not preach, we do not advocate for specific government policies. So in terms of the things that the organisation does, is that clear? Can everyone hear? In terms of the things that the organisation does, essentially we do three things. The first is that we produce a series of global indices that are used by the United Nations, the World Bank, a variety of different countries to benchmark their performance. The most important, as I said earlier, is the Global Peace Index. We produce a terrorism index, an ecological threat report, and a positive peace report. Essentially, each of those reports follows a very similar methodology. We take 163 countries around the world. We take measures that are trustworthy, usable, and comparable, and we create an index that then allows us to look at who's doing well, who's doing badly, what are the types of themes that organizations, governments, and multilateral organizations should be focusing on. So the UN loves us because they would never list countries from good to bad, but if somebody does it for them, they're very pleased. The second thing that we do is, you might call it contract research. So we have a team of PhDs, very like many of the people in the room. In fact, we have a former colleague with us in the room. And essentially, we are engaged in issues around conflict, peace, and economics. I will be leaving this evening to go to Northern Ireland. We've been working in Northern Ireland for about a year now to produce a peace index for Northern Ireland. 28 years ago, Northern Ireland created peace between the Catholics and the Protestants. The IRA, a terrorist organisation, became Sinn Féin, a political party, and for the last 28 years, the government has tried to reduce violence. Now, the issue with reducing violence is it's a necessary condition of peace, but it's not a sufficient condition of peace. And whilst you'll see in Northern Ireland there has been a steady decline in violence, Northern Ireland isn't thriving. It's one of the poorest areas in the United Kingdom, and there is still a lot of dysfunction going on. So hopefully our work will form a trigger that will allow those people who are working in peace and security to have a different view of what they might do. And the final thing is peace building work on the ground. We've trained something like 250,000 people on our peace course. We do active programs of training, bringing communities together to try and help them use data and use our methodology to make their local communities more peaceful. So over the last 12 months, we've been working in Cambodia with women's groups. We've been working with violent extremists in Mozambique, working with World Vision in South Sudan on an agricultural project, and working in Australia where we've taken 100 refugees and immigrants from war-torn communities, and we have run them through a peace training course. At the end of the course, they get a grant, and that grant they use to make their local communities more peaceful. So, can peace be measured? Well, what we did was we went through an exhaustive process of trying to come up with measures that could be used, and we wanted measures that were internationally comparable. So essentially, the process was, where are the reliable indicators of peace, and can we use them to benchmark every country in the world? We ended up, through a lengthy process, with 23 indicators into these 3 different domains. Now, as everyone in the room knows, if you're going to talk about peace, you've got to have a definition. So the definition that we've used here is the absence of violence or the threat or fear of violence. And that's important because you can see here a measure like violent crime and homicide is clearly a measure of violence, whereas the availability of small arms or increases in refugees is an indicator of potential fear or potential future threats. So we wanted to have a holistic view of what violence looks like, and we came up with these 23 indicators, worked with a range of universities that Professor Aslam knows some of the professors that we worked with in order to weight the indicators in a way that we thought was sensible. And for the last 20 years, we've published the index. I'm going to focus on 5 things today. The first one won't surprise anyone. There are record levels of conflict in the world today. 61 active state-based conflicts, 20 of which have got over 1,000 deaths. The second thing is geopolitical fragmentation. Again, not a surprise to anyone here. We put a paper out on this recently. We divided the world into the superpowers, the 2 superpowers, China and America, the great powers, including India, the middle powers, and the emerging powers. And the analysis showed that we're probably at a peak influence for the US and China. We are seeing a rapid decline in terms of the European great powers like the United Kingdom, where I'm from, France, Germany, and so forth. And then there are emerging great powers like India. We're living in a much more fragmented world, and many of the institutions like the UN are not really geared to deal with that. The third point I want to make is around conflict clusters. So if you look at the Horn of Africa, what's happened there is instead of a conflict between one country to another, we are seeing a range of countries involved in contiguous conflicts. And when we take the Horn of Africa, we find it emerging in the Middle East. And so there is a real danger that we will tip into a regional war there, stimulated by a lot of investment from Middle Eastern powers and the influence of other powers like Turkey. AI, Professor Aslam and I were talking about AI. It will come as no surprise to anyone here that the the resources that have been put into AI for peace are absolutely dwarfed by the resources that have been put into AI for warfare. The level of securitization that we're seeing throughout the West, and no doubt in developing countries as well, means that AI is rapidly being adopted to reduce civil liberties and to accelerate war. And finally, Iran. Conflict with Iran is a multiplier to all of those other things. It is forcing people to take sides or not take sides. It is driving inflation, which is increasing the cost of debt for many countries. And even if the war stops tomorrow, there will be a considerable long tail of effects. I'm just going to talk now a little bit about those 5 things. Let's start with the key findings. Is it okay for me to touch the screen? This is clearly a map of the world. Red is the least peaceful countries, and blue is the most peaceful countries. You won't be surprised to see Russia, the Horn of Africa, Myanmar as some of the least peaceful countries in the world. Similarly, you won't be surprised to see the most peaceful countries are the Scandinavian countries, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. It's not really fair to put India in comparison to the most peaceful countries in the world. And the reason, of course, is that India is so huge that you have considerable diversity and you've got enormous land borders as well, which are a bad indicator. So it's probably reasonable to compare India with China, the US, Brazil, large countries with contiguous land borders. And what you can see there is India is somewhere in the middle. It's less peaceful than China, but it is more peaceful actually than the United States, which is perhaps a surprise. We look at the most peaceful countries in the world. Most peaceful countries in the world, Iceland has been #1 for many years. New Zealand, Switzerland, Slovenia, Ireland, Austria, Portugal, Singapore, Finland, and Japan. So those of you who pick up quickly on those countries will see that they share a number of characteristics that India doesn't share. First of all, they're all relatively small, with the exception of Japan. They're all under 100 million. In the case of Iceland, it's under 1 million. The second thing is that many of them are islands. It's clearly easier to be peaceful if you're an island. And the third thing to point out is it's helpful to be a democracy. It's not necessary for peace. Singapore is there in the top 10, but it's helpful to be a democracy as well. So that's the most peaceful. Let's look at the least peaceful. For the first time since we've done the index, Russia was the least peaceful country in the world. And if you have a look at it, sadly, it occupies a space with a number of really troubled countries: Sudan, the DRC, Ukraine, Israel, South Sudan. So, I want to now move to trends in conflict, and I'm going to talk a bit about the results from the peace index. So what you'll find here up is less peaceful. So global peacefulness has declined in 15 of the past 18 years. And the average country now is 6% less peaceful than it was 20 years ago. What's driving this deterioration is almost entirely complex. It's not so much internal peace, it's almost entirely driven by external conflicts. I mentioned that we have 23 indicators. Here we see the 23 indicators and the trends that have happened. And as you can see, 17 of them have worsened. Violence, demonstrations, external conflicts fought, internal conflicts fought, all degraded massively over the last 20 years. And even the positive ones, like the UN peacekeeping, is actually not necessarily a particularly positive thing. So we've said in our measures that if peacekeeping funding declines is because people don't feel like a threat. Well, of course, the reason that the UN peacekeeping has declined is because the major powers can't agree to spend money on peacekeeping. So even that one is not a particularly positive thing. Let's look at the fragmentation that I mentioned earlier. What we've done here is try to break this fragmentation down into, is it around trade, is it financial, mobility between countries, or is it political? And as you can see from this slide, the world is a lot more fragmented than at any time since the Cold War. Now, trade has flatlined internationally, and that was before the US imposed sanctions, capital controls, and the tariffs that have gained so much publicity in the last couple of years. But the really big trend, as you can see there, is the red line. The red line is political, and there is increasing political polarization. There are fewer trade deals being done, fewer political agreements between countries. So that's the real change over the last 10 years. I talked a little bit about the position of the great powers, and here we can see economically what's been happening over the last 20 years. Germany, Japan, France, the UK, and Italy are roughly half of global GDP where they were in 1995. Big round of applause for India. India is the only one of those great powers that's actually grown, and it's grown significantly. But when we talk about political fragmentation and fragmentation in general, we look at those European powers in Japan, and they are sitting on, if you can see at the back, the green here is interstate conflicts. But what's really changed are these internationalized conflicts that have grown dramatically over the last 10 years, and then there's a small number. So interstate conflicts are roughly the same. It's the internationalized intrastate conflicts that have really grown. And the other really worrying thing here is that this bar chart tells you what happened at the end of the conflict. And you can see here at the beginning, it could be a government victory, a rebel victory, or low activity, which is kind of a forever war. And this pattern has completely changed by the time we get to the last 10 years. Conflicts are lasting much longer. They are not ending with peace treaties. They are not ending with one victor. These are the conflict clusters that I talked about, and essentially what we're seeing is there's a continuous connection across this region, and I'll spell it out in a bit more detail in this slide. Just read it out for those that can't read. At the back, the Horn of Africa and Greater Middle East are distinct conflict systems, but they're coupling more tightly because of the Gulf sponsorship, Red Sea geography, and gold flows from Sudan to the UAE. There are three bridging states, Egypt, Turkey, and Israel. They operate as central nodes to both regions, pursuing Nile security, Red Sea access, and containment of Iran. The Iran war accelerates all of these, as we've said, and there's this emerging axis. On the one hand, the UAE, Israel, and Ethiopia on one side, and they are set against Saudi, Egypt, and Turkey. So, for all of those reasons, we are unlikely to see an end to this conflict in the short term. And the most likely outcome is that it will spill over. So, I'll touch briefly on AI, and I'm sort of rattling through this quite quickly. Okay, everyone knows about AI, everyone's read about AI. The numbers in terms of warfare are quite staggering. So as you can see, there's 100-fold growth in drone deployment in the Ukraine. The Ukraine's supplied 2.4 million drones last year. This year, they're manufacturing between 5 and 6 million drones. And it's naive to assume that humans control the AI. That is a comfortable conclusion that we often give ourselves, but it's simply not true. If you look at what's happening in Ukraine, there is a kill zone on the Russian border. It's about 15 kilometers wide, and all the Ukrainian soldiers are doing is pulling the drones there, and they will kill anything that moves. They don't want human intervention. Why? Because humans are slower than the machine to make a decision, And secondly, because if you have a connection to the drone, that connection can be blocked by various technologies. We tried to use this slide as a way of showing what's happening with this kill chain compression. And as you can see, during the Cold War, cruise missile planning took up to a day, whether that's now down to launch down to about 5 seconds. And the difficulty is that there were mistakes made when you had the data, but now you have AI accelerating it. Even when you have the data, there's clearly appalling mistakes still being made. The classic case was the 148 schoolgirls that were killed in Iran at the very onset of the Iranian war by the Americans. They said that they had military targets. The AI is certainly not perfect. I mentioned a little bit about the staggering difference in the investment. And as you can see there, which is the bottom is on the log scale, the green is kind of peace type investments. And there are thousands of times difference between the amount of money going into peace in terms of AI and the amount of money that's being spent by governments and defence in terms of AI. So there's an order of magnitude difference between these two. I'm just going to finish up on the economic impact. So I said at the beginning that we're a non-partisan thing, we don't take political sides. The other thing that we do is we try to steer away a little bit from the language of human rights. And the reason for that is that we can often come across as white people telling people of different cultures what they should be doing. But I think more important than that, the fact is that the people that make the decisions, politicians, make the decisions on economics. They don't make the decisions on human rights. Anyone like to hazard a guess at the cost of violence worldwide?
10.5%. 10.5% of global GDP.
Yeah, well, that's not a bad guess. Okay, 21.8 trillion, and we've just broken it down into these different areas. So that's the GDP of China. So the cost of violence to the world is the GDP of China. That's what we are throwing away in violence. So just to put that into context, the GDP of China represents $2,500 US per man, woman, and child on the planet. It's an astonishing waste. Now, I'm not standing up here and saying we can eliminate it, but if all we did was reduce that by 10%, just 10 small percent, effectively we'd have the GDP of a mid-sized country like Belgium 3 times over. So the benefits of pursuing peace and making even a small dent on that are quite staggering. But I did say it wasn't a very positive or happy presentation, so I do apologise for that. But I'm going to finish up on something that's a bit happier, but let me just finish up in terms of the latest report. So state-based conflict is at its highest level since the Second World War, and these conflicts are increasingly internationalised, they're financed, and they're resistant to change. The post-world unipolar order has generated a fragmented multipolar system which no single power can impose terms. Economic interdependence, once a break to conflict, has been weaponised through sanctions and export controls and contested choke points, transmitting shocks rather than absorbing. And I put there at the end, perhaps something like positive peace is the most durable response in a fragmented world. So I do want to just finish up, maybe having given you the doom and gloom, maybe to talk about a couple of successes before I finish up. So had I been giving this lecture to you 20 years ago, I don't think anyone would have believed the progress that has been made in terms of defeating terrorism. That is something that was 20 years ago completely unpredicted and a surprisingly positive outcome. The second thing is homicides. For some reason that nobody can explain, homicides are declining worldwide, including in countries like America, where there's been a massive increase in the availability of guns. So that are two really positive trends against all this doom and gloom. The other thing is that there are certain countries that have demonstrated that if you measure, focus, and apply on creating peace, you can be successful. And I'm going to give you three that I'm sure you know very well, but the press don't talk about very much. The first one is Iraq. So in the last 10 years, 5 million people in Iraq have gone, internally displaced people have returned to their homes. The level of educational achievement has increased, the level of health has increased, and they've had free and fair elections. Given the fragility of the situation in Iraq, that is an amazing achievement. The second one is Mexico. Mexico, all you hear about it is the drug cartels. And the government, any government, faces extraordinarily difficult challenges with these hugely well-financed drug cartels. But over the last 5 years, we've seen a steady improvement in peace. And that has been achieved in part by doing something about the cartels for the first time, but also because they've taken proactive development outcomes to the country, which are starting to show results. And the final one I'm going to talk about is the Philippines. So the Philippines violently suppressed the separatists about 10 years ago, and a lot of people in the West said that this was an appalling thing to do, and they behaved in a deeply immoral way. Since that happened, what's happened in the Baja region is that they've been given greater autonomy, and the Philippines government has invested heavily in development outcomes, both for the former separatists, but also across the Philippines as a whole. In our index, the Philippines has climbed 30 places. Peace now reports to the president, not to any one government department. And every single government department has to have a peace plan. And every tertiary student in the Philippines has to do a peace course. So, in conclusion, I hope you found this interesting and valuable. I've skipped quickly over a lot of the stuff. Vision of Humanity, Economics of Peace, you'll find all of the reports if you want to read them. As I said, it's been a great honour and a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Saville, for indeed an enlightening and thoughtful provoking lecture. The thoughts have provided us with valuable perspective to the contemporary challenges to global peace and the possibilities for creating more peaceful and resilient society through global peace index parameters. Now, it is my privilege to invite Professor Rajiv Nayanswar. Sir is professor at the Nelson Mandela Center for Peace and Conflict Resolution and also a scholar of peace and international relations. Sir, I request you to kindly take the podium.
Thank you very much. Am I audible? Namaskar. Good afternoon. Adab. I have been given this arduous task, challenging task to become a discussant of a very good presentation made by Mr. Brett Cdoe, CEO of Institute of Economics and Peace. So we all enjoyed this presentation. Complex charge and a complex task to quantify peace, make indicators, peace which is always subjective in nature, different perspectives, different perceptions, and it has got different contexts all over the world. Conflict clusters, all conflict clusters may have their own dynamics. And these dynamics may throw different kind of situations. Understanding, arresting those situations may vary when as researchers sit down and pick up the same methodology and try to give different weightage to different points. So I think you have done wonderful. I would love to read that. I'm sorry that I did not read it in details, but I definitely it's somehow inspired me to read that. So this is once you read any piece problem and methodology. As I told you earlier, I was at the Institute of Defense Study and Analysis. And there was one organization called Nuclear Threat Initiative. I worked on nuclear issues. And they generally again made indicators, indexes, and tried to rank different countries on the basis of those indicators and indexes. And I had got an authority of challenging the methodology and in fact giving it different kind of results when I use my own experience. So of course, as I told you, from place to place, it may have different results coming, different conclusions coming, different ideas cropping up. So but I am really impressed by all the indicators you have taken. These are indicators, and since we are going to sign an MOU also, so it will be, I think, challenging for our students. I challenge the students and faculty members of the center to revisit those indicators and try to see whether we can have different results or the same results. I'm not saying that we should not be biased to have different results all the time, but from our own perspective, can we have different results? Now coming to some of the issues you have mentioned. And violence. Generally in security studies we talk about, and generally Galtung is oft quoted person. And we, as you have rightly pointed out, we generally believe that when we talk when we talk peace, we say it is not just mere absence of war. I think it is generally established phenomenon. And why? Because what you have approached and what this study report has approached, it is a complex phenomenon. So there are many factors which influence peace. And there are many factors, sometimes even to how to define violence. This is also a challenge. Is coercion not violent? Sometimes even the scholarship says that even rewards are violent. Where you try to influence a person, a group, for an unjust cause. So this is also problematic. So I think these are some of the issues. And you now I come to India. India's again ranked quite low. So again the issue comes up. I'm not saying that you are right, you may be right. But I think that we have to study the complexity or the situation in which India has placed. And again, you have sort of is China quite well placed, they're comfortable. So is peace politically insensitive? This is one question. Has democracy no role to play? Once you are authoritarian, it could be peaceful. There could not be any violence. Once you are democratic countries, are you not allowing people to protest? Sometimes this protest may turn into minor violent outcomes. So how to measure that? Again, the same question comes, is there any fair indicator to judge the violence? Only then you can judge about peace. So, you see, these are some of the questions. There are many dimensions of peace which you have rightly covered. In the Indian tradition, which somehow, unfortunately, we have not generated enough literature, and that is our fault. And that is the fault of the peace studies of India. And but our literature is you heard Quran. In Quran, there are many people, there are more Muslims in India than in Pakistan and in other countries. So about peace, you will find in Quran. There is another book, that is Mahabharata. Mahabharata is about a treatise on war, but it ends up in Shanti Parv, that is peace festival. So is Shanti or is peace or and Shanti are both the same? So there are many postures of peace also. We have got one book that talks about what are postures of peace, statues of peace. So this is, I think, once we interact, I know I have got limited time and I should not expand the privilege which I have been given to me. So I think there are, again, if you talk other literature also, Shanti, the moment we say Shanti, it is quite holistic. Vrihaspati Shanti. Everything, there should be peace in the world. And again, very detailed treatment has been given about the terms Shanti, about peace. I think this is our duty. I think this is challenge for us. And through you, we are accepting the challenge that we should bring forward our own concept of peace, and then can we use our own indicators to judge and to again classify the world, and can we also say that okay, this conflict cluster is more peaceful or less peaceful. So philosophy matters, ideas matter when you are quantifying anything. So how you intervene your data with your own ideas, that will be quite useful for us to contribute. And I think we should accept this challenge. This center should accept this, even the opportunity. I will not say challenge, but opportunity thrown by his report. And we should read and we should reflect on it. And I will not say much. We will interact. And I think it's wonderful. I acknowledge there are two things which I wanted to say, which I, because of time, I was just restraining myself. About one is state-based. I completely agree with you. Till the Russian-Ukraine war, all the literature on international relations, security studies, all concluded the time of traditional war is over. The time of the use of conventional weapons is over. And there will be use of cyber weapon, there will be use of invisible weapon. For what Russian-Ukrainian war has demonstrated or is still demonstrating, that old conventional weapons and old conventional styles, old method of warfare, as you have rightly pointed, interstate warfare is still quite dominant phenomenon in the international relations, can be combined with the new systems, the new warfare, new modes, and that is hybrid warfare, which we very fashionably call it. And this is what is happening in all the region. New weapons, AI, yes, it is getting used, and but drones, of course, drones. I agree with your data. Now about 40 lakhs or 4 million drones. If both countries have decided to produce. So this is again new trend which is coming up on export control again, and I am just linking it to the idea of justice. Export controls, when it is, I have done my PhD on that, so I will not again not speak on that. But export control was once one-sided phenomenon. Western countries use it against Eastern countries and southern countries, we say, very like countries like India. But what has happened? Because of the dissemination of technologies, even in drone, what you have talked about, new powers have emerged. Turkey has emerged as a new power. China, Russia has emerged as a new power. And because of the dissemination of advanced technology and many weapons are being acquired, there is retaliatory method which is taking place, and this conflict has been given new dimension. Even without turning violent, China is retaliated. When trade wars are started, China retaliated because it had got the promise. We also tried, now it has, again, because of United Nations Security Council Resolution 1540, this export control has been internationalized. Before that, it was a Western phenomenon. Now it is an international phenomenon. So now it has got a very complex dimension. It has become an instrument of, again, conflict, even without using war. And it has become a trade warfare, what very dominant method of trade warfare. Trump one had used it differently, but yes, I think on another occasion I will go into details. But new techniques of conflict are coming, and I think all these newly emerging trains, I'll say trains, we can have new trains. If we analyze it, I can reel out, I can point out several new trends which are defining conflict of the world. Different layers, how peoples are getting discarded. Same country. I would not like those who have been listed as a peaceful country. They are supplying arms. And they have become bringing conflict in the world. So I think we have like Sweden. Sweden is one of the leading peace proponent of the world. At the same time, it is one of the leading arms suppliers also. So these are complex phenomena which need to study, and we can justify with the report, and we can do justice. Right? Peace has to combine with justice. If it is not, then it will be lopsided. So it will not be a permanent, perpetual peace. There will be a problematic peace, and it will be very unstable peace. With that, thank you very much for coming here. I
Thank you, sir, for your insightful observations of bringing together the key dimensions of today's discussion. It is my privilege to invite Professor Aslam Khan. Okay, so we can open the session for question answer session. So if you have any question, keep the question. Raise your hand, please.
Thank you, sir, for this lecture. What I was actually, I'll be audible.
There is a, you can switch on the, I can speak on it.
Yeah. Hello, thank you, sir, for this lecture. I was like wondering when you were just going through one of the slides that actually says that how the conflict has been triggered more at the peak of the Cold War, probably after the Cold War. One thing that I was being like thinking about, this is just out of inquisitiveness, is that how do you see the decline of liberalism? And just to save the liberalism, the conflicts have also been triggered. That is mostly because of the territorialization that is based on identity, migrants, and the refugee crisis. The second thing that I was thinking across the idea of gentrocracy, something called as gentrocracy given by the Samuel Mayon, who actually argues that most of the people in power are like more aged rather than the entire population. So how do you think that this is actually impacted in a way? Third thing that if we talk speaks about the AI, is it only that we are currently connecting it to the workplace? Uh, do you like in the indices also see that AI is contemplating with the climate change and triggering the conflicts? Thank you.
Two more questions, please.
Thank you, sir, for your insightful presentation. My question is that since you are talking about pursuing faith, in this era, peace cannot be merely understand as an abstract idea. We have to operationalize it on ground. So, how do you, since you are also giving reports to UN, what recommendations you present or you recommend in terms of Iran and US war for peacekeeping and peace building measures?
You will also to introduce yourself first.
My name is Amaya Mara, and I'm from Nelson Mandela Peace Conflict Department. I'm pursuing PhD from India.
Thank you. One more. वहाँ पे है आपके पास है
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Abdullah. I am a senior research fellow at the Nelson Mandela Center for Peace and Conflict Resolution. Sir, last night I visited both your profile on LinkedIn and also read the Global Peace Index of 2026. The 125-page document on 58 page talks about the methodology, wherein it says that the cost of conflict can be measured directly, indirectly, and through multiplier effect. So my question is that to measure the cost, we either take the data from the government or we take it from the civil society. Now, the government has a tendency to underreport the data, while the civil society has the tendency to extrapolate the data in a way that it often goes overreported. So, how do you reconcile between the data coming from two different sources?
Good question. So in the second round, we will take the more questions. We can reply. All right, let me pick up on what Professor Nayan said, which is essentially that it's a little bit arbitrary, the indicators that we've chosen. When you produce an index, essentially it's a bit like a photograph where something is in focus and everything else is blurry. So clearly, the indicators that we have chosen are not the right or perfect indicators. They were the best indicators that we had available. So we have used data from what we believe to be the most reputable third parties, which includes the UN own data. We work with the Oxford Poverty Group. I don't know if anyone presented with them here. And then we purchase data from the Economist Intelligence Unit and organizations like that. So we've tried where possible to get reputable data that allows us to benchmark between countries. The subjective decision is which of those measures and what's the weighting. And you're absolutely right. It is kind of arbitrary that we weight a homicide at 1% and then we weight small arms at a different percentage. We recognize that it is subjective. We tried to go through a group of experts in peace and conflict in order to come up with the weighting. And now we've come up with the weighting. If we've changed it, the danger is that countries would come to us and say, I don't know why you've done that. It means that I was 20th and now I'm 30th. So why is that happening? So there's benefit in consistency and there's benefit in recognizing your limitations. So what you'll find at the back of the report, and thank you for mentioning it, was Abdullah, wasn't it? The methodology, the indicators that we've used, where we've got them, and the weighting is in all there. So we have nothing to hide. In terms of the questions, liberalism and the elites. Okay, we work off two definitions of peace. So I've talked about negative peace in this presentation, the absence of violence or the threat of violence. So the other one which you're referring to is positive peace being the attitudes and institutions that allows a society to thrive. And so we've produced reports on both of those. And as everyone in the audience knows, it's a bit like sickness and wellness. Just because the patient isn't sick, it doesn't mean that they're well. So we've created another index around positive peace, and taking Northern Ireland, where I'm going to present the index next week, negative peace has improved. Positive peace has not moved, and it's not moved for a range of reasons, but it's partly because peace has been achieved through segregation. So we have found that to have sustainable peace, you're absolutely right, Professor, you need both, in our language, negative peace and positive peace. And you can take some examples of countries like El Salvador, where what they have done is they have imposed negative peace by imprisoning tens of thousands of people. But there is no investment whatsoever going into positive peace. And so it's very hard to see that as being a sustainable solution. Whereas the example I gave in the Philippines is a classic case where, yes, they have imposed negative peace, but at the same time, they are invested in positive peace. And just to come back to your point, one of the measures is around, we call it equitable distribution of resources. So that has been shown in our statistical analysis as being a very good correlate towards a sustainable peace. AI for climate change, yes.
Something similar like Columbia climate students. Professor Alex Urbani.
I don't know that example, but what I can tell you is that the investment is so paltry in comparison to what's being spent in AI in terms of government securitizing and other things. And what's astonishing to me is the level at which governments are working together. The Australian government gives data about Australian citizens to the US government. And they wouldn't have done that 10 years ago. It's remarkable that that's happening. The next question was on operationalising. So I've sort of criticised the UN a little bit, but I'll sort of explain why. When they decided to send a team in to Haiti, there was a collective agreement that the amount of money required was around 600 million, and it was going to go to the Kenyan police force. In the end, the countries participated with a level of 16. So essentially, instead of 2,000 troops, you had something like 200 or 300. And these troops, police, were being set up to fail. There's absolutely no way that they can sit on the resources they have. So I think people know what needs to be done, but the frameworks that we've got in place don't allow consensus to emerge. And clearly what's happened in the Security Council is that whatever China wants, the West will oppose, and vice versa. So we're in a very dysfunctional situation as far as multilateralism is concerned. Was that all? I was going to give you a quote back. I don't know the Mahabharata, but there's a quote from the Upanishads, which is Da Damyata Dayata. And I think, yes, India has a long and important tradition in terms of the philosophy of peace. And it's something that isn't well known about in the West.
Second round of questions, please. There is no need for any
Thank you, Dr. Sevan. It was a wonderful listening to you. I have two questions related to, during the last slide, you said that cost of the war is almost like $20 trillion. One of the fallacies of our time in understanding and discussing peace discussions and all of that is that the cost of the arms industry also is almost $3 trillion, which states funds it. Look at the foreign ministers of the US and how the Chinese authorities are funding the small arms industry. Why don't we measure are the states irresponsible at basically making the military industrial complex so deep and rooted that the peace measuring is literally impossible and should be a part of indicators as well. That how much the arms industry and run by the states, government, across, basically they are arguing about the peace, but at the same time they are funding it. Look at Sahel region for that matter, Mali for that matter, how they are surviving. The arms industry and the responsible act of the state should also be the part of that measures and the indexes. The arms industry is not something disengaged with the states. So that's how do you basically respond when you basically measure those things?
Yeah.
Bring us the index. Where the arms industry is basically these violent acts that cannot happen without the arms industry. And this is all basically funded by America, the Chinese, everyone. And in the name of national security, every state does that. Why can't we basically discuss that as well? The second question is that one of the discussions you had, that you said that the peace can be measured only that can be arranged. If you discuss Kaplan's measuring peace discussion, he says that one of the essentialist problem with this idea of measuring peace is that we always look at the top down. And where the institutions basically is completely toppled by the states. Where the agency of the people which basically try to employ into have a top down and a bottom up approaches. So when we measure peace and try to arrange peace, where is the people in that? In that way, how do we basically come to such conclusions when we say that the peace is possible only and only if there is engagement? But where is the people in all such discussions? One is a socialist question, one is the something is very answer the street specific. And this is a common sense. One need not to be a communist to understand these things. This is common sense. How do you respond to that?
Just adding to that, Kaplan,
Next.
Sir, I have a similar question. My name is Bashar and I'm in master's first year.
Use that mic.
कौन कर लो वहाँ पे है?
In this domain.
ये वाला बोलिए।
Okay, so I had a similar question. I had a similar question. Like we see actually, it's as Rajiv sir mentioned that it's mostly the major governments that are making the decisions, and it's not the ordinary people who are making decisions on where the war is happening or like any warfare that's happening. It's the government decision, and it has always been like that in history. So, like in modern times, how and in your experience, how an ordinary citizen can contribute to something like persuade government to choose dialogue over violence or like warfare?
अभी रुके हैं इनको भाई वेट इंट्रोड्यूस कर दो से करिए
This is the right question. In 2020, Australia was the country in 2010, which was very skeptical about India's nuclear power program and coal. And today, Australia is the country in 2026 which signed an administrative arrangement with India to export uranium, and it is a country which is among producing one third of uranium, and India is a country which needs uranium to complete its 2047 100 gigawatt of nuclear power program. So I want to know public perception, that how the perception changed and how you looked at India from the energy perspective and from a weapon perspective.
Then the third round of questions, the final one.
They're getting more difficult. All right. To answer your question, first, the arms industry. If you look at the back of the report, we do include measures such as expenditure as a percentage of GDP. We look at things like arms exports. There's a range of measures there which we include as our definition of negative peace. You're absolutely right. Governments and countries make a vast companies make a vast amount of money out of arms. The question is, what can we actually do about it? And so, what we try to point out is that cost of violence. And the example I gave, clearly we can't eliminate the armed service. We can't defund the police. But if we can just shift that slightly, then that would make an enormous impact. So our pitch has been, or our approach has been, try to quantify it and then impress on politicians and governments and so forth that this is the cost, and actually are you investing on the other side? So if you look at peacekeeping investment, it is 0.5% of global military expenditure. So there's an insane imbalance there. And then your second question was, if I interpreted top down, bottom up. We don't, in the Institute of Economics and Peace, we don't pretend to understand the local conflicts in the same way that people on the ground do.
what we have is a framework that works globally, that is data-driven, that we hope and believe is not a Western concept of morality being imposed in an inappropriate way. So when we do work on the ground, we teach the framework, and then once we've taught the framework, the individuals who we are working with design their own program on the basis of that. And it can be the outcome can often be unexpected. Australia has many problems. And we had a terror attack in Bondi just before Christmas. We were running this program with a group of refugees from the Middle East. They were young people, 18 to 30. And when we gave them the grant at the end of it, we said, how can you make your community more peaceful? And they wanted a space where they could go in the evening. And they said, coming from the Middle East, they felt that they were in danger as young people walking out on the streets. And that's a horrifying thing to hear for me living in Sydney. I would never have thought that. So the answer is that we're a small organisation. We're 30 staff and contractors. We don't understand the dynamics on the ground. We work with local partners, hopefully like the university here, because you have far greater insights into what's going on than we will ever have. Does that answer the question? What can an individual do? There's a couple of things. Firstly, I said at the beginning of the talk that just the fact that you're here, just the fact that you're working in this space, that itself is an act of hope. And hopefully through your studies, you will learn what works and what doesn't work, and therefore what you as individuals can do. I'm sure you teach this at the university, but we are a great believer in systems thinking. And what systems thinking tells us is that small incremental changes on individual levers can aggregate up to a massive change. So if all you do is a small thing, hopefully people will follow, and that small thing will aggregate into something much bigger. Since we're here, if you look at what Gandhi did, that's a perfect example of that. That was not centrally planned. The Salty Match. It was chosen, and a small act leads to a massive change. I'm going to be honest with you about Australia. There's not a lot of thought about who the uranium goes to. So we have a big. Australia is a nuclear-free country. However, we're sitting on a massive mine of iron, of coal, and uranium and various critical minerals. And so the discussion internally is not about India. It's about should we be exporting this or not? And if we do export it, who's it going to go to, and how much is it going to be worth to the economy? So yes, we did that to India because India is an ally and we can trust it. But the debates internally have been very much about should we be exporting it at all? And we have two sides of politics that disagree quite vehemently on this, and one side is very much looking to invest in nuclear power in Australia, which is something we've never done yet. So there isn't a consistent answer. It's a debate that causes huge differences of opinion within Australia.
Last one, because we are having another program, right now, and we are having another meeting also. So please be brief.
So a couple of days.
Introduce yourself first.
I'm Anushwa. I'm a PhD scholar at the Nelson Mandela Center for Peace and Conflict Resolution. A few days back, we had a professor coming in from Japan, and she was speaking about the issues that Japan regionally faces. Now, when you were speaking and describing the GPI, you pointed out that island spaces are more peaceful as compared to a regional country that is in war or in some conflict. Uh, but she also did speak a lot about Japan being into this sort of, I mean, emotional turmoil with a conflict. I mean, with a possible conflict with either China or Russia or the Korean Peninsula. So, is the how to say, is the psyche or emotions of the people being considered while you are saying that Japan is a peaceful country? Are the anxieties that Japanese populations face being, just because Japan is not in an active conflict, can we say that it is still peaceful, or does it kind of become into a negative peace, positive peace conversation?
Last question, Ayan. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ayan. I'm a second year student at the Nelson Mandela Center for Peace and Conflict. I have two questions. First is, all right, it's on deterrence, the nuclear deterrence. So, can nuclear deterrence create a stable peace, given the fact that liberalism and, in precise, the democratic peace theory has failed to stop wars? Thank you.
You might have asked this question to Rajiv sir.
Question is for him only.
So Sohail Ahmed, I'm a master student at the Center for Peace and Conflict Resolution. Sir, you talked your organization's headquarters is in Sydney. You speak Australian accent. You live in Sydney. I assume you're Australian. So you're doing really good work here. But when we see Australian government, they are making pacts like Quad and AUKUS. So how do you reconcile those two? Because you had militarization as a key domain in your indicators. So how do you reconcile these two, like your government's doing?
Sure. Good question. Okay, so since I've got Zach here from the economics department, we're a team of economists, so we don't really do emotions. So no, we don't consider how the Japanese people feel about peace and whether they are anxious or not. We try to use external measures that can be validated. There's a big problem with using those types of measures in that they are very culturally specific, whereas something like homicide or expenditure on the military is much less culturally specific. What I would say is that, generally speaking, the countries that do well in terms of positive peace do well in the happiness index. But what that tries to show is that you need a complete solution that includes economic growth. The classic case in this region is Bhutan, which is kind of stepping back a lot from its happiness measure, just because there's been no economic growth, and therefore people aren't happy because they don't feel that they've got a better opportunity for their children. Liberalism creates peace. Look, the fact that we can quote from texts that are 3,000 years old shows that peace has always been an aspiration for societies, and it's nothing to do with liberalism, it's nothing to do with communism or socialism. It is a factor that there have always and there always will be wars, and as students of peace, what we hope to do is just nudge people away from the cliff in the hope that they will behave in a way that's rational, in a way that will benefit their families and their communities. What do we have to say about Australia? Okay. Australia isn't in the top 20 in terms of the peace index. It's between 20 and 30, which would put it on the same level as a country like Slovakia or one of the Eastern European countries. What drags Australia down is not yet AUKUS, because that expenditure hasn't gone through. Rather, it is the fact that there are very high incarceration rates in Australia and very poor developmental outcomes for the indigenous population. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So whilst they're only 4% of Australians, they have outcomes which are something like outcomes that you would have expected for Europeans 100 years ago. So there is a shameful gap between the outcomes that they need and they ought to achieve and what's actually happening. In terms of AUKUS, we're non-partisan, we're non-political, we're not going to take a position on AUKUS. My personal view is it's being sold to the Australian people as a defensive measure, but you don't need attack submarines for a defensive measure. And if you actually wanted to defend Australia, 8 submarines is just not going to make any difference whatsoever if they're ever delivered. So I don't. It's a crazy investment decision, but that's a personal opinion, not an IEP opinion.
Thank you all for making our question answer session so enriching and insightful. Now, it is my privilege to invite Professor Aslam Khan, Director, Center for Distance and Online Education, for his presidential address. As we all know that our director is also a professor at Nelson Mandela Center for Peace and Conflict Resolution. As a distinguished scholar of peace, international relations, and strategic affairs, he brings both academic depth and truly international perspective. For those of us at Cdoe, his leadership has been a constant source of encouragement to look beyond the routine boundaries of offline and online and create opportunities for meaningful academic engagement and collaboration. Today's program is in fact a reflection of his vision. So I request you to kindly take the podium. Thank you very much.
First of all, I want to say special thanks to Mr. Ben Seville. I agreed on a very short notice to deliver this important lecture. I know there was no time of preparation or something that you can deliver much upon. So I am very much thankful to you. Since this discussion that was going on, we were talking of different parameters of indexing about positive peace or negative peace. When we talk of peace, the first thing in mind that comes is human nature. So that is very much important. Because if you see the whole discourse of human nature, that was also discussing around how to bring happiness, how to bring peace, how to set parameters for that matter. When Socrates was questioning there that what is justice, what is pity, though there was a democracy there at that particular time. But what was the parameter of the democracy when the justice was absent or there was a biasness in a particular system? So that was the one important parameter, and the whole discourse of democracy and these peace indexes that emerges from the Greek political roots, that democracy that traveled from Greek political philosophy to medieval period, and the post-medieval period, modernism, then post-modernism, still we are having those kind of the discourses with us. So measuring something on the basis of that, the human nature comes first. Then again, human desires. For example, somebody is in poverty is very much happy that the people they are getting much wealth. So how you will measure that particular thing? So when you are setting a parameter for an index that is lacking those particular basic fundamental things, then it becomes difficult to generalize something. So in my opinion, a lot of things were discussed here. For example, take the case of India, for instance. If you are going to measure India in terms of the peace index, when there was a mention of Mahabharata there, in Mahabharata, they said non-violence is the highest virtue. Non-violence is the greatest friend. So these kind of the discourses were there. And there was so much apprehensions about liberalism and all. I must tell you, liberalism and realism, they go hand in hand because it is a product of realism. On the basis of liberalism, the liberal values, utilization, ideology and all, the realism captured the whole discourse of human values, peace and all. Because if you see who are the scholar who is speaking on liberalism. The same scholar they are associated with the realism. So these discourses are coming because how to capture the mind of the people, because the one important parameter is the might. Everybody is looking for dominance. That there was a mention that Sweden on the one hand they are in the Scandinavian countries, they are having a very good position in the peace indexes. On the other hand, they are supplying arms to the countries. So arm industry that is going on. What is the purpose of this art industry? That is one of the parameters in this index. That is a very basic question. What is the objective and purpose of this art industry? Either to stabilize the world or to destabilize the world. So these are the basic questions to our researchers, our scholars to ask. So what is the purpose of making such index? When these are the things that we need to question first. The power structure we need to question first. We are in the era of post-structuralism, when we are coming back to the realism, that the whole course of government, for example, this export control, what is it? Take the case of Iran, for instance. Even for the basic things, for the medicines and other aspects, no countries giving that kind of privilege to them. So what is the fault of the local people, common people? Because the question was coming, where are the people? It was a very fundamental question by Dr. Prem. Where are the people in that? We are living in a different kind of political system. I will give you one example. In 90s, I visited Libya. There was a dictator over there. If you see the system of that particular time, the transportation was free, the hospitals were free for the people, and the people were getting some incentives where they are going to get their special occasions like marriages and all. So that was the system of that particular time. When we talk of the democracy in the modern time, that's the parameters we are taking. Take the example of Iraq, for instance. Take the example of Libya, for instance. Take the example of the Middle East. Are the people are very much fooled that they don't want to be peace there? What are the whole discourse of power acquisition is there? That how to gain power, how to defend ourselves. So this deterrence factor is very much there. So until unless the human nature is not going to be changed, the fear factor is not going to be addressed, because every country is fearing from the other country. Why? This whole technology, this modern technologies, robotics and all is coming to the effect. So when these technologies will get momentum, you will not find peace anywhere, because this machine doesn't know any emotions. So these all the things are depend on the human nature, emotions, your culture, your cultural upbringing. So these things need to be taken into the account. I will not introduce much because we are having another program by three. So then I will say thanks to all of you. My special thanks to the Professor Abdullah Harris in a very short period, he was agreed to collaborate with us in this important lecture. Professor Rajiv Nainji, my elder brother, we know each other from years. Dr. Vinesh, Dr. Sudhanshu, Dr. Prem, Dr. Bilal, Dr. Arif, Dr. Zakaria, and my faculty members, because in a very short period they gathered, they arranged each and everything, because yesterday was a holiday, and I requested one or two faculty members to come at the odd hours. There was a holiday also. They came here. We drafted all the programs. We took out because Brett has to leave, I think, tonight. So we were not having enough time for that matter. So I'm very much thankful to my faculty members. They are always my strength, my other staff here, and my dear students who are coming from the Nelson Mandela Centers, my scholars. That because of you, this program, I must say, it's a grand success. It's the first program here that I'm conducting, and I'm very much thankful and grateful to all of you. Thank you very much.
Questions, sir? Yeah. And I think I'll request all the students from Nelson Mandela Center, please come at before 3 o'clock at Indiana Culture Center Conference Hospital.
Thank you very much, sir, for your valuable words, and above all for your guidance, encouragement, and support to Cdoe. We are grateful to you. Now I will invite Dr. Sudhanshu Trivedi, Nelson Mandela Center for Peace and Conflict Resolution, to deliver the vote of thanks. has been covered by Professor Aslam sir. Nothing has left. Informality में ये बात कहनी पड़ेगी. Namaste, Assalamu alaikum, and a very good afternoon to everyone. It is my proud privilege to propose the vote of thanks on the behalf of Nelson Mandela Center for Peace and Conflict Resolution and Center for Distance and Online Learning. At the outset, I express my sincere gratitude to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Mazhar Asif sir, and our Honorable Registrar, Professor M.D. Mehtawalam Rijvi sir, for his inspiring leadership and for providing the vision and encouragement that make such meaningful academic engagements possible at this Institute Jamia Millia Islamia. I would like to express our deepest appreciation to our distinguished speaker, Mr. Brett Saville, COO of the Institute for Economics and Peace, Sydney, Australia, for joining us and sharing his valuable insights on the complex challenges confronting global peace today. Sir, your perspectives has added an important international dimensions to this discussion. Your observations has reminded us that peace is not merely the absence of conflict. It is closely connected with good governance, social harmony, economic opportunity, justice, resilience, and the ability of society to address their differences through dialogue. My special thanks goes to Professor Ashok Khan sir, Director, Center for Distance and Online Education, for his guidance and for bringing together the academic vision and institutional support required for this program. I would also like to place on record my sincere appreciation to Professor Abuzar Hari sir, Director of the Nelson Center for Peace and Conflict Resolution, for his continued commitment to promoting the culture of peace, conflict resolution, and meaningful academic dialogue at our center and also in our collaboration. My sincere thanks also goes to Dr. Kasif Saab, convener, for his valuable coordination and support in making this program possible. I'm particularly grateful to all the faculty members, senior faculty members of my center, Professor Ajit Jain sir, discussant, Dr. Manish sir, Professor Zakaria Saab, Arif Saab, and Prem sir, Bilal sir, Rasi Saab, other faculty members of Cdoe, teaching staff, non-teaching staff of Cdoe, who joined us and contributed to the intellectual vibrancy of today's program. Your presence and engagement demonstrates the importance of creating spaces where diverse perspectives can come together in the pursuit of peace and understanding. As we reflect on the journey, we are reminded that the future of peace will depend not only on the governments and international institutions, but also on universities, educators, researchers, young people, scholars, citizens who believe in dialogue over division and cooperation over confrontation. I hope today's lecture will inspire us all of us to think beyond the challenges of the present and to contribute in our own capacities towards building a more peaceful, inclusive, resilient, and just world. Once again, I express my sincere gratitude to our distinguished speaker, our university leadership, esteemed colleagues, and everyone who contributed in any way for the success of this program. With these words, I conclude by thanking you all over your precious presence. Thank you all.